Good morning and welcome back to Planner Craft. I'm Natalie and today we are going to be doing some work with stencils. Now bear with me one moment just while I pull the chat up so that I can see it. And hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be able to do hellos. Okay, let me see if I can rotate that around. Okay, so don't be afraid to say hi, let me know that you're watching, ask any questions. You spotted the new graphics, yes. That's a bit of a combination of Lucy's music, so she did the soundtrack for us, and Ian did new graphics. So it's all on them, it's not me. And morning, Linda. Okay. So if you're watching on YouTube, I don't think I'm going to be able to see your chat today. It's just not coming up on my software. So if you do have any questions, you can always drop me a message on Facebook or Instagram, or leave it in the comments and I will try and catch up later. So I've started a new document and this measures the active area of my scanning cup. Now for the purposes of today, I'm going to be using what should be a 12 by 12 sheet of acetate. So if you keep that in your mind, that's what I'm going to be working with. And I'm going to divide that into 4 different stencils. Oh, can't find us on YouTube. That's odd. Bear with me one moment. Let me just see if I can have a quick look. Yep, it should be on there. If you go onto the main channel page, it should be at the top of the listing. It's the one that says Stencil Design Free Vector Design Workshop. So, yeah, it's just I know a few people have connection issues, so at which point they tend to hop over to YouTube. So, in terms of materials that you're going to be working with for your stencil, you either want to work with some thin acetate, so not so thin that it's going to fall apart, but thin enough that you're not going to get too much of a halo around if you stamp. You could be using mylar. You could be using card or waxed card. All of those work really well as stencils. As you start to get a bit more detailed, however, you are going to want to change your method of production slightly and start to look at things like metal, just because once you get to a certain level of intricacy, if you want your stencils to have any kind of longevity, you need to do something a little bit stiffer. And that's okay, Deb, I don't mind checking. Okay, so I'm going to start by dividing this into 4. So we have our guides here, and I'm going to pop one there and one there. We don't have to be accurate about this. Be pleased to know we're not doing layering. It's just going to be 4 different ways of doing heart stencils. So I'm going to start off with a really basic one, and if you're working in canvas you can do exactly the same along with me, just you're going to use a heart shape from the basic shapes. So I'm going to click on my heart tool and I can click and drag. Now depending on how we draw this, is going to change the proportions of our heart a little. So if you want to go a little bit wider, and then we can adjust the shape of our heart just by using the little red dot. So that's a point where we're happy. and we're going to convert it to curve. So that takes it away from being a shape and actually putting it into a path. So that means, although in most cases you'll find that it doesn't mind if you don't do that step, it's just belts and braces. So it's really good practice to get used to going for each action that you do is just convert that to a path. Obviously in Canvas you don't need to worry about it. So now that we've done that, that's basically converted it from a shape to nodes. So we can start to actually play with the shape a little. So we can add a new node. We can tweak that. Now if it starts jumping around like it's doing here, if you just press and hold Alt, it's just going to enable you to just place that a little bit more. Now that I've done that little kink, I'm just going to pull that back this way, and all I'm doing is just using the arrow keys on my keyboard to just gently nudge that so it feels like it's back centered again. So we can take that shape and we can line that up roughly to the center of our stencil. I'm going to zoom in and we can see that we've got a little bit of a weird curve going on here. So the shortcut to get to your node tool is A in most software. And I'm just going to click that and let's put that there. So we get this curve that's going up here. And if it looks a little bit angular, just pull it back a little. Let's get that one. I want that node there. There we go. And again, you can always use Alt whenever you're finding that that snapping is being a bit annoying. Now with stencils, wherever you've got a point, you are better off rounding it round just a little bit. It's going to just prevent injury for starters if it's something that is particularly sharp and thick. So if you're working with slightly thicker acetate, then you can just do that so you don't cut yourself on it. It also means it's going to cut better as well. Okay, so next little tool, we have a corner rounder. So again, if you're working in Canvas, don't worry about this step. I'm just going to round that off. Round that off down here. And we can go to bake appearance, which is essentially the same as converting it to a path. And it's going to put in a few extra nodes just to get the blade around that nice rounded corner. So that's a nice simple start for a stencil, and it also gives you the mask as well. So when you're cutting your stencils, if you're working with older shapes, keep the inside bits too, and you can use those in your crafting. Next, let's start to get a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to zoom back out and move along. Over here, just so that we don't get items confused, I'm just going to call that simple stencil. As we move along, we're going to start getting groups as well. So we can, by naming them, it helps us keep everything in order and easy to find where we're going. So this time, I'm going to start with the heart tool again, and we're going to draw another big heart. Now this time we're not going to worry about rounding the corners because we're going to use that heart as a frame. So we're going to convert it to curves because we want that path there. Now what we're going to do is going to draw another heart shape. And I'm going to give it a colour just so that we can see it a bit easier. So there's our little red heart. Okay, and we're going to put it so that it's overlapping the edge. Now before we go any further, I'm going to go to symbols, which if you can't see it at the moment, you can go up to View, Studio, and down to Symbols. Okay. If you're working in canvas, don't worry about this, you can just work with a duplicate of that same shape. Okay, we're going to go create. That's going to make it into a symbol, so it appears down here. And you can see that it's changed to a symbol up here. Now symbols are useful for wherever you want to use duplicates of shapes, but you may still want to edit them. So I'm going to start off with this one by keeping our hearts a solid shape. I'm going to do a negative of that, and then finally I'm going to do a detailed outline. And because I've got those as symbols, I can always then go back and re-edit. So with that now selected, and we can see that our symbol is blue here. If we press and hold Alt, we can drag out a copy. Now you can do exactly this on canvas too. Just make sure that you always have that symbol selected rather than the heart shape within it. So I'm not being too fussy about my layout at the moment. Now this is going to be where it differs slightly between canvas and Affinity. Because Affinity can weld non-overlapping shapes, you can actually put those into one layer and then use it to subtract, or you can use it to weld to the outside shape. In canvas, you're going to have to be a little bit cleverer. So when I do a subtraction, you're going to want to do that to each individual heart. It's going to take a little bit longer, but you will get there eventually. Okay, so don't think, oh, I can't do that. It's just going to take a little bit longer time. So what I would say at this stage is, just in case you need to have a backup, I'm just going to duplicate that curve shape in place. So that's Command and J on a Mac, Control and J on a PC. On canvas, you're just going to use the duplicate button at the bottom of the layers tab, and you're going to move it back so it lines up with the original. You're going to hide that duplicate copy, so you're just working with one on your Mac. Okay. So now that we've done that, I'm going to start getting a bit more fiddly with my layout, so I'm getting it exactly where I want it before I do any kind of calculations. So make sure you are happy with your layout. You know, I'm still not going to go for a perfect drop pattern. We don't have to, although I've shown you symbols in the past where we've used it to create that kind of effect. It's by no means necessary to do so. So let's move that in there. Going to move that in there so we get a bit more of that heart in. And I'm pretty happy there. So at this stage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of those elements, including our two hearts, including the invisible one, and I'm going to group them. And we can call that small heart stencil. Okay. We can duplicate that the same way, so Command and J or Control and J, or in Canvas, once you've done your group, you can just duplicate that group using that same button down at the bottom. So to group is Command and G on a Mac, or Control and G on a PC. I'm going to drag this copy down here. So it's quite important to do that before we get to the next bit, so that you've got your two working copies. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this one, and I'm going to do one more copy, but I'm going to leave that down here, and I'm going to give this a new name. I'm going to call this detailed. And I'll show you what we're going to do with that in a bit. So let's go back to this one. My first thought was to do a mask where we're just going to cut out the little hearts, and I want them to be sitting in that frame. So if I show you what I mean, if we take these shapes, okay, and have them all selected, so they're all blue, I'm going to go detach, and they're going to revert to being groups. I'm going to click and drag that group and pop it inside here. Come on, he'll get there eventually. Come on. No. There we go. So before you panic and think, oh no, where's everything gone? There's two ways that you can do this. One is going, oh, it's having the right day with me today. Come on, go, no. There we go. Like that. That's what we want. So you want it where you have the shorter blue line under here rather than the blue line vertically. And there's a difference between the two. So the one masks the one way, the one masks the other way, basically. So we want to have those hearts inside that circle. So basically what I want at the end of this process is to have just those hearts that are inside the heart as a actual outline. So if I go into here, I can just knock that fill out, and you're going to be left with something that looks like that. Now if we were to send that to the machine at the moment, then it's going to try and be clever and try and cut everything out. But what I will do is I'm going to come back and show you how to fix that towards the end. Okay, now the other option that we have is, rather than having that punching through the heart, so to speak, is we can actually do it the other way around. So let's maximise that one. And again, we're going to detach the symbol. So by detaching the symbol, what you're doing is saying, right, I want to work on that separately and I don't want it to affect everything else on that page. So we can go detach. And we're doing Command-Shift-G to ungroup, but they're still going to be all selected. So with our symbol at the moment, there's only one shape in there, but if you had multiple shapes, then basically that's what the grouping is there for. Okay, I'm going to weld all of those shapes into one. Because they're not overlapping, we can do that nice and easily. On canvas you don't have to worry about that welding stage. Okay, I'm going to select both those hearts and the grey heart underneath it. And we can go subtract. So you can see that this time round we're going to have a different take on it. So you've got the hearts where we're going to stencil through and just get the little hearts, and you've got the big heart that's going to have these holes removed. Now obviously, because these elements here aren't touching, then you're going to have to think a little bit more about your layout. So let's step back one. And we can move those around. There we go. So once you get back to where your hearts are, this time we're going to just select our individual hearts and we're going to move them so that we have a little bit of an overlap. So you want them to still be recognisable as hearts, but you also don't want to cover up too much of that outside frame so that you can't recognise what it is anymore. If there's anything where it's snapping and it's only just touching, Just make sure that you do nudge that with your keyboard. Try and make sure that you have shapes that go off the edge, because that's what's going to help you. Like so. Then we can move that one in there. And again, just because it's trying to snap to the bounding edge, so we can just move that in there. And as I'm doing this, I'm just trying to make sure there's nothing that's going to really catch. So like this one just here, if we were to leave that floating there and then give it like a scrub of texture paste or something like that, it has the tendency then to lift. So you want to just tether it in some way to another shape. So something like that. So now we can take those shapes, as in the red hearts, we're going to weld those together, and then we can do our subtraction. And we've got something that looks like that. So let's go back to this one. And at the moment we've got all these little heart shapes that are masked by our big heart. And take all those shapes and I'm going to weld them into one. Okay, let's go back to my big curve and let's put the colour in it, just so I can see where it is. So it doesn't matter what colour, we can work in black and white if you want to. And morning Sally Ann, sorry I didn't see you pop up. So with our curve section, now that we're happy with our layout, we can take it back out that heart, like so. So it pops up to the top. We can select both the hearts and the big heart. Now on canvas you are going to want to use divide. Okay, so it'd be really tempting to use remove overlap, but for this next process you really want to use divide, and then you're going to get rid of the shapes you don't want. On Affinity we can actually use intersect, so basically wherever your top shape overlaps a shape underneath, it's going to keep that section, and if there's not something underneath, it's going to delete it, like so. Okay, so let's undo that. If we do it this way around. There we go. So you have, let me just go through what I did. So you've got this one here, which is going to do XOR, which is basically the opposite of intersect. So where it overlaps, you're going to do that. So that one's useful for if you want to do like an edge design, where you've got positive and negative elements. And then you've got intersect, which is going to do just your heart shapes, like that. Now I still have these backup shapes there if I need to. So if I want to create a layered stencil in the sense of wanting to put background colour in first, then I can still do that if I want. A lot of what you do with vector design is about giving yourself options. So try and give yourself the backup of having lots of duplicates, because at the end of the day vector shapes take very little memory. You're looking at like you need 300 paths for your lowest level scan and cut to start going, not sure, don't think I'll do that, which is a lot. So don't be afraid to use duplicates. If you hide them when you export to SVG, they don't go anyway. Same if you're working in Canvas, if you have hidden shapes, they don't get sent to your machine. So use that as a way to kind of get round having excess information in your file. So as long as it's hidden, it's not going to send. So finally, we have our detailed heart set. So this is still linked to our symbols. And of course, we know our symbol just has that heart shape in. Now, if we click onto that heart shape, rather than the symbol bit here, that means we can actually start to edit that shape. Now, if we want to edit our outline, that's all well and good and brilliant, and it will do it to every single one. But let's say we want to get a little bit more intricate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that heart, and I'm going to go to the offset tool, the contour tool up here. I'm going to click and drag that shape in. Okay, and we can see it's done this little bit rounded top up here. If we go up to contour type, if we put that to a point, it's going to just put a point in there. Okay, and we can still come back and edit that the same way that we did our rounded corner in the top one. So now what we can do is we can press and hold shift, select the bigger heart, and we're going to do subtract. And straight away we're going to create a load of heart shaped frames. Now I'm also going to do that little bit of rounded corner, just so on those particular points inside it looks a bit odd. So if we just take it up just a little, and we can do just a little bit there. So you want that to be less of a rounded corner than here, just to make it look right. Okay, and again, just going to pull those up. So you can see by looking at these, it's already done all of these to the same extent. So at this point we can go vague appearance, and that's going to put all those extra nodes in, and all the other symbols will also have been baked too. So now let's zoom out just a titch. And in terms of canvas, because you haven't got that symbol, what you would do is create one heart frame, so one of these, and then duplicate that around. Now, because we've done that subtract, we've got a nice hole in the middle. So let's ungroup this for a moment, just because there's going to be lots of moving around, and rather than struggle, sometimes it's just easier to just ungroup it for a moment. Now what we want to do is get all those heart frames to actually overlap. Now it could be that you're overlapping them totally so that you get like little links, or they can just be touching. It's up to you. So I'm going to do a few different options. So I'm going to have some that overlap and link, some that just weld, and I'm going to try and fill this shape as much as I can so that it looks recognisable as a heart without doing any kind of calculations to start with. So you can see by doing this we actually have room for a few more hearts. So as long as the blue line is on symbol rather than heart, we can press and hold Alt and we can take a copy. Okay, we kind of have something that looks vaguely heart-shaped. If we were to do it as a standalone stencil at the moment, it's not going to quite work. So what you could do is you could actually shrink that symbol so that you get more of a detail into the shape. But when you do so, make sure that you do it to the shape inside and not the symbol, just so that it then automatically updates to all the others. Whereas if you're on symbol, you can change the shape or the size of one shape at a time. That's what I'm trying to say. So maybe a little bit smaller. So again, select the shape, not the symbol. Take it down a bit more. And like so. And let's try and do a few of these where they overlap too. So I've got one there. One down here. Let's move this one up there. And there. Up here. Now I can press and hold Alt to put a copy in. And I'm going to go about there. Let's go there. And finally one there. Okay, so at the moment, if we were to cut that as is, we could weld it and we could just have the mask. Okay. However, if we want to do it the other way, where we're actually going to have that kind of heart outline impressed onto it, so that we lose bits like this, you could still do it the same way as we did this bit. The choice is yours. So I'm just going to take that one there. Just 100% happy, and pop that in there. But what about if we wanted to actually have that outline bonded to the outside of our stencil? So in other words, up here. There's a couple of ways that we could do it. We could go to the trouble of making a frame for the outside, subtracting the heart and all the rest of it. Or we can just basically take those symbols, we're going to detach them, because once they're detached we can weld without any issues. We're going to ungroup them, so Command Shift G, Control Shift G. We're going to weld like so, and then we're going to select our heart underneath and we're going to subtract. So that's going to give us another nice stencil that we can use. So stencils are always a little bit tricky in terms of thinking about the absolutes of hole and no hole and working out where they actually connect to. So this is something that you want to practice. There's going to be an article on it in the new book as well. It's going to get you creating your own stencils from scratch. So this is going to be a good way for you to get kind of your head around how stencils work in terms of when you need them to join, when you don't need them to join, and cutting into and out of things. So I hope you've had a good morning, and if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. Oh dear, just sort of like how high do you have to have the oven so that you can bake your appearance? I like that, Linda. I think that might blow a few. Oh dear. Yeah, about 220. Oh dear. That just makes me think back to my college, well, university days. That there was a typo in a cookbook, never a good thing. From ran out of ingredients halfway through a recipe. Thought, oh well, it's only like 5 minutes around the corner. Yeah, no good idea. Oh dear. Okay, with all the comments is making your parents not parents. Oh dear, oops. Yeah. Mum, if you're watching, I think you'd be a crunchy lemon sponge cake, wouldn't you? Okay, so hopefully you've had a good little bit of a play with Canvas or Affinity if you're using that. If you are using shortcuts a lot, you have the bridging tool as well, which you can use for creating stencils. Oh, Carol, you need to pick up and to do that. Do you do that one time or just both together? No, it wouldn't take that big of a number, would it, Mummy? You're not that big. Oh, geez, made my eyes water now. So, as I was saying, you've got the bridging tool in shortcuts a lot for your stencils. So, if you do something and you think, oh no, I've gone wrong, don't think you've got to start back from the beginning. You can create a bridge just by using a basic shape. And that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed today. Friday I am back with an art journaling session. So before I go today, I've got a little bit of a list of things to go through. Number 1, wherever you are sitting on Friday, if you are crafting along, make sure that you have a surface in front of you that isn't going to hurt if it gets sprayed, if it gets painted, if you get gel medium on it, if you get texture paste on it. So something that you can scrape, something that you can put alcohol on. Anything that is going to take a good amount of cleaning. So I use an old cutting mat that is, it's getting everything thrown at it at the moment. In terms of supplies, you will need gesso, so that can be white, black or transparent. Any of the three will do. You are going to need sprays. You are going to need texture paste or some method of creating texture. So if you've got no texture paste, you could use multiple die cuts, for instance, to add texture to your page. So if you don't like getting messy, that's a good way of doing it and staying nice and clean. So you can use your die cuts instead. Masking tape is another good one. Tissue paper or rice paper. So we can do some stamping and actually include that into our piece as well. If you have some backing papers that you know can take mixed media, so those that are printed on paper from Dolly Dimples, for instance, then you can definitely use those. You are going to need, did I say sprays? I think sprays, powders. So if you've got something like brushes, or if you've got the explosion powders from Pretty Gets Gritty, because I'm going to be using all Pretty Gets Gritty products. Any gel mediums, crackle, you can use those. And if not, you can stick to just using acrylic paints and chalk paints. Finally, just to add some detail, if you have any pip pens, water-based felt pens, or Inktense pencils, then bring those along too. So hopefully you've had a fantastic morning, and I look forward to seeing you on Friday. In the meantime, do help support other smaller craft businesses out there. It's a bit of a weird time in the industry, and a little bit stressful for most of the small ones. So take care for now, and I'll see you Friday. Bye.